and we have to really escalate the noise we make so that we'll be heard.
Welcome to Gay USA. I'm Andy Humm.
And I'm Ann Northrup.
And in the news, there are now, in the Gay USA, more than 60 anti-gay, anti-LGBT bills pending in 25 states.
We promise not to give you the entire list,
No.
but we will discuss the details of a few of them. And the U.S. Supreme Court has set the day before my birthday as for oral arguments on the big same-sex marriage cases. That will be April 28th.
Yes. On the 50th anniversary of the Selma March, President Obama integrated the fight for LGBT rights into the civil rights cause. And we're going to remember some of the gay veterans of 50 years ago.
Oklahoma is in the process of maybe ending state marriage licenses entirely. It's very confusing, though.
But Colorado is moving to ban so-called conversion therapy for minors.
Wellesley College, Hillary Clinton's alma mater, a historically women's college and still is, announces it will accept transgender women as students.
We mourn the loss of gay and AIDS activist and a friend of ours, Vinnie Allegrini, in New York.
Very much mourned. Transgender activists in Canada have come up with a unique way of fighting back against these anti-transgender bathroom bills. This could be a method that will sweep the world.
And Peru has rejected a bill for civil unions for gay couples.
Andy's going to tell us about Florence Henderson singing a saucy rendition of There Is Nothing Like a Dame at the Broadway Backwards benefit. Oh, that's because if she sings it about a girl, then it's different.
Right.
I get it.
That's what Broadway Backwards is. And
Okay.
our guests are the makers of a breakout hit play about the plight of an of a gay teen in a small town. We'll be joined by James Lacine, the writer and the performer, of The Absolute Brightness of Leonard Pelkey, and the director, Tony Speciale.
But we are going to start with some of these anti-gay laws and some pro-gay laws starting in state by state. All of this is a backlash to our success with the marriage equality movement. The right wing is searching for ways to stop us in our tracks, take us backwards, ameliorate their losses, undercut our wins. So in Georgia this week, the Senate there has passed a religious freedom bill. All of these religious freedom bills are meant to make it legal for business owners or others to discriminate any way they want on the basis of their personal religious beliefs. This is going to wreak havoc in this country should this stand.
Absolutely.
In fact, 200 clergy wrote a full-page newspaper ad opposed to this bill. These are clergy members. Nonetheless, the Georgia Senate has passed it, and there's no reason to believe the entire legislature won't pass it and the governor sign it.
They passed it 37-15 in the Senate. So, and Coca-Cola has remained silent on this, and we're not getting the corporate support as we did in Arizona.
I would love to. I suspect this is my speculation only, but I do play a reporter on TV. That the right wing, after their defeat in Arizona with the corporations coming out against these bills and the governor of Arizona, Jan Brewer, who is usually the friend of the right wing, vetoing it, the right wing got very busy behind the scenes with these corporations and started twisting their arms and saying, you are not going to go out and oppose these bills anymore, and we're going to punish you if you do. I have not seen the evidence of this yet, but I suspect there is a lot going on behind the scenes with the right wing and the corporations.
And most of the big LGBT groups have been caught flat-footed on this. And not only that, but we've developed this narrative that the march to victory with marriage is going on, and everything's going to be great. And the other side, has been plotting this. And we could have figured that we've said on the show many times, what is Alabama going to do when they're forced to do same-sex same-sex marriage, they're going to rebel. It was kind of obvious that this was going to happen, but our side did not prepare for this. The interesting thing that is happening is that, in a lot of these places, there's not much of a big LGBT movement. There's the new movement for Southern equality. It's all very good and moving, not very powerful at this point, but it's getting more powerful. Now that they're passing bills against us, people are coming out. People are asking for local gay rights laws where they never asked for them before. So that's good, but it's going to be a bad period.
Yes. I had something else to say, which I've forgotten. It'll come to me in a
you.
minute. But the corporations have been silent, and this bill is similar to the one that was passed in Arkansas. But as an example of us fighting back, a Democratic representative, state representative in Arkansas, Greg Leding, Leding of Fayetteville, has introduced a statewide non-discrimination bill for sexual orientation and gender identity because, in addition to the religious freedom bills, the bills that are passing easily are these local laws cannot trump state law bills. So now our side is saying, okay, well then let's pass a statewide bill.
Well, you got to try.
Yeah.
And North Little Rock unanimously did pass a commitment to equal opportunity based on sexual orientation, gender identity, genetic information, and marital status.
That's civil disobedience. Because they're not allowed to pass those bills if they go farther.
I haven't read the actual text of it. It says they're committed to equal opportunity. It doesn't say you haven't. We'll clarify that.
I get the distinction. All right, I'm looking for that. And what's also interesting is what's going on in Utah, because the big news last week was that, look at Utah. Now, with Mormon backing, they've proposed a non-discrimination statewide law. It only covers housing and employment, not public accommodations, because, that gets icky with the bathrooms. But this is a great step forward to have the Mormons get behind a non-discrimination law. Sure, it has lots of religious exemptions written into it, but those religious exemptions exist across the board for race and religion and national origin and everything else in their human rights law.
And before we got a chance to pick that bill apart, they introduced a terrible bill that has now been condemned by everybody, including Kate Kendall from NCLR, who is originally from Utah, because it has ridiculous religious exemptions.
Yes, and exemptions for businesses, for government officials. Government officials can rely on their religious beliefs to discriminate against people. And the other thing about the Utah bill, the supposedly good version, the mediocre good version, is people say, well, it's okay that has religious exemptions because that is what they do in Utah. They do that across the board on all these bases. But the problem is that other states around the country are not going to look at the fact that that's a situation unique to Utah. They're going to say, Utah is going to pass this non-discrimination bill that has all these broad religious exemptions, so let's us do the same thing.
The only solution is a federal comprehensive LGBT rights law or good judicial decisions that would protect us.
And interestingly, Vice President Joe Biden, in a speech last week, seemed to begin to speak up in favor of a comprehensive bill, although he wasn't quite detailed enough about it. I think he's being given a little more credit than he deserves.
Of course, in condemning one of the crazy bigots this week, he said, Jesus God! Who was he talking about?
Ben Carson.
Yes, he was talking about Ben Carson. Jesus God! So we can use religion too and invoke the name of religion on our side.
Well, what does it say when both Glenn Beck and Joe Biden condemn Dr. Ben Carson as an idiot? That's what they also called him, an idiot.
Now, then there's Oklahoma. Of course, the famous quote out of Oklahoma this week is from State Senator Joseph Silk, who said of us, "They don't have a right to be served in every single store." We're going to get more to them on marriage.
People need to have the ability to refuse service if it violates their religious convictions. And I don't have the right to be served in every single store.
Well, they don't understand civil rights laws.
I have homosexual friends. That's what he said. So, yes, they don't understand it. And, there is a case to be made, or people have made the case over many years, that, you shouldn't have non-discrimination laws for anybody. Yes. You should just let the marketplace act as it wants, and if people want to discriminate, eventually the marketplace will punish them.
That is the
and therefore
libertarian
that's
view.
okay. Yeah.
But of course, there were a lot of African Americans who couldn't get a lot of basic services in discriminatory areas, not just the South, including the North. Things like housing, very basic things.
Food.
Yes, and it leads to all kinds of disparities and health disparities, and it's just awful. So we passed civil rights laws. We're going to get to more of that later. There's some good stuff going on. Colorado, the House there did ban conversion therapy for people who were under 18. They passed it 35 to 29, and that's moving on.
And in Texas, the Association of Business, which is like their big chamber of commerce, certainly not a particularly notoriously progressive organization, a very standard business organization, has condemned the license to discriminate religious freedom bills. Bad for business.
Now, the bills I read in Texas are proposed as constitutional amendments that are going to need voter approval. So it's going to get ugly in Texas, as the whole state is going to be embroiled in this discussion.
Going to get ugly in Texas?
Well, uglier. Okay. But, at least, yes, people are sticking up for our side.
And in Indiana next week, they'll be debating a religious freedom bill to save the bakers, because that's one of the places where someone got told they can't discriminate.
And in Colorado, there was a big rally against the religious liberty bill.
And in Indiana, the activists will be out in force, all wearing red, which is their symbol for being against these bills.
Okay.
I also, as long as we're in the States, need to correct something I said last week. I must have been thinking of Illinois when I said that the capital of Missouri was Springfield, when, of course, it is Jefferson City. But almost every state in the Union has a Springfield. I think we should just declare that all Springfields are capitals and move on from there.
And then Ann will be right, wherever we go.
Twice a day.
Okay.
Stopped clock.
All right. Marriage news?
Yes.
Well, the big news is that the Supreme Court has scheduled oral arguments for the day before Ann Northrup's birthday for April 28th. There are going to be two people on each side arguing these cases. There are two questions to settle.
We still don't know who will do the actual arguments. They promised to let us know that within the next couple of weeks. And it'll be interesting to see who they pick. And there's a lot of competition, I'm sure, for those slots.
And on the eve of these arguments, the new Wall Street Journal NBC poll says that U.S. support for same-sex marriage is now 59%, 33% opposed, which is a new high.
Maybe or maybe not in Oklahoma. Well, actually, same-sex marriage is legal in Oklahoma, and the sky has not fallen yet, and there don't seem to be riots in the streets. Nonetheless, the Oklahoma House of Representatives has passed a bill that says the state will not issue any more marriage licenses because they don't want to upset clerks who might have to issue these licenses against their religious beliefs.
This passed 67 to 24. So if you want to get married, you have to get a clergy-issued marriage certificate or an affidavit of common law marriage. And the purpose of this bill that they passed is to protect county clerks who do not want to issue licenses to same-sex couples. But the thing is, still got to take your certificate to the clerk and get it registered in some fashion.
How is that different from issuing a license?
So
I think they're going to an awful lot of trouble for no real result.
But our side points out that with the passage of this bill, essentially you will have legalized same-sex marriage in the state legislatively.
Even if the Supreme Court does not.
Correct. And the supporters...
So thank you, Oklahoma.
The supporters of the bill say that marriage was instituted by God, not the state.
Really, what is this country coming to? Also, on the Supreme Court oral arguments, a lot of various groups and organizations and coalitions are filing amicus briefs with the court, and a large group of corporations has filed a pro-marriage, pro-same-sex marriage brief with the court, saying that to have states where you don't have legal same-sex marriage is going to hamper their ability to recruit employees because it's going to be seen as a bad place to live and work.
Right. In Nebraska, the Eighth Circuit has stayed the decision opening marriage to gay couples. No explanation was given. It would have started this past Monday.
But they have the Eighth Circuit has scheduled oral arguments in the cases from Nebraska, Arkansas, and South Dakota for May 12th. That'll be 2 weeks after the Supreme Court hears arguments on same-sex marriage nationally, but they will not have decided it until presumably the end of June. So the Eighth Circuit is going ahead and proceeding on their own cases in these states.
By the way, there was another poll called the General Social Survey, and they also found that just about a third of Americans now still oppose same-sex marriage. 45% of Republicans support. 40% overall still say same-sex relations are always wrong, but 88% say it's now okay for all of us to teach college.
Oh, LGBT
Yes.
people?
Yes.
Oh, okay. Hey, well, Republicans not in support of same-sex marriage would include Rand Paul, who says same-sex marriage offends him and a lot of other people.
He was being very incoherent. He says he's for some kind of competing contracts for equal rights for gay couples, and says that may be where we're still headed.
But
no, it's not.
But religious marriages are for heterosexuals only. Well, what about the liberal religions that do marry same-sex couples, Rand?
Well, no.
And Senator Ted Cruz, campaigning in Iowa, told a bunch of evangelicals there that he will continue. Everybody else may have given up, but I am continuing to fight strongly against same-sex marriage.
Now, Jeb Bush, his likely campaign manager, David Kochel, Kochel, stepped back from his outspoken support for same-sex marriage. He had signed the amicus brief in 2013 in California for our side. He heads Bush's Right to Rise PAC, which sounds vaguely
So he
obscene.
didn't sign on to Ken Mellman's big Republican amicus brief to the Supreme Court this time, saying that he's staying out of things now that he's Jeb's campaign manager.
Clint Eastwood dropped out too.
In Alabama, there continues to be interesting judicial maneuvering there. Now, they legalized same-sex marriage, and then they stopped same-sex marriage, and the state court has said to probate judges, don't do it, because the federal judge who said do it, really her case only applied to one or two probate judges and a few couples. So now, finally, our side has gotten its act together, and the ACLU and the National Center for Lesbian Rights have filed a suit to turn the Alabama marriage cases into a class action so that it would apply to all probate judges and all same-sex couples.
Right. Now, did we talk about the suit against the Social Security Administration last week?
We're about to.
Okay. Gay and lesbian advocates and defenders filed suit on behalf of same-sex spouses who were being told to repay overpayments to them. It's a case of a couple where one of them was getting disability.
We did talk about that one,
Yes.
but there's a new one from California where couples who were getting Social Security benefits as married couples in California, when the Windsor decision came down, they wrote to the Social Security Administration and said, now that the federal government is required to recognize our marriage, does this change our status? And the Social Security Administration didn't reply, said no, said yes, got all confused, and finally lowered their payments because both members of the couple's incomes were now being considered. And the couple said, fine, that's what we expected. But then the Social Security Administration has said, but we overpaid you in that time since Windsor, and we want $6,000 back.
A little bit more than that, actually, and it's an outrage because it was the Social Security Administration that wasn't recognizing them.
And the Social Security law says that the Social Security Administration is not allowed to recoup overpayments if the recipients were not at fault.
That's right.
And clearly, in this case, they were not at fault. They even tried to tell the Social Security Administration that they should change their payments, lower their payments, and the administration ignored them and kept paying them and told them they were wrong, and it's their fault.
So if this is happening to you, do something about it.
The Williams Institute has has analyzed Gallup poll results and says that approximately 350,000 married same-sex couples exist in this country, and those who are married are more likely to be raising kids, also are less affluent than similarly situated heterosexual couples, but more financially secure than unmarried same-sex couples.
Right.
You can go to the Williams Institute at UCLA Law School website for more information on that.
Okay, let's talk about Selma.
Okay.
Well, it was the 50th anniversary of the historic march there, and President Obama was really on the case in terms of integrating LGBT issues. He said, "We are the gay Americans whose blood ran on the streets of San Francisco and New York just as blood ran down this bridge." And he said, "Ask your gay friend if it is easier to be out and proud in America now than it was 30 years ago."
And didn't note enough that Bayard Rustin and James Baldwin were there in Selma in '65, but there is a picture of them, a very stunning picture of them, very
indeed.
nice. As predicted, the U.S. Army has changed the way it is requiring discharge of transgender members of the Army. Instead of that being accomplishable by lower level commanders, now it has to go up to the Assistant Secretary of the Army to approve a discharge of any transgender member. This doesn't mean people aren't going to be kicked out, but it's a little harder to kick people out. And it's also the same trajectory followed before Don't Ask, Don't Tell was repealed. And it turns out that transgender service members are excluded not by some law, but simply by policy of the Army, and that could be changed in an instant.
As they did at Wellesley College. It's an historically women's college, and they will now accept transgender women students, anyone who lives as a woman and consistently identifies as a woman, plus anyone who is considered female at birth who identifies as neither male nor female. Now, those who identify as men are not admitted, but if one is a student and no longer identifies as a man, as a woman, was a man, they can still be allowed to graduate.
Big brouhaha over transgender issues at a Planet Fitness facility. Let me see, in Midland, Michigan. So a woman who is a client of Planet Fitness complained that there was a man in the locker room. Well, of course, it's a transgender woman who this woman found unacceptably masculine. And Planet Fitness has an all-accepting policy. And so they took away the membership of the woman who complained. And people started saying, whoa, wait a minute. Well, this woman, it turns out, had complained over and over and over again in very obnoxious ways, and that was against the policy. But there is quite a firestorm going on. And all sorts of digging into the background of the transgender woman. Also, this facility has private changing stalls and private bathrooms.
So what's the problem?
Good question. So this has become more and more an issue, obviously, all over the place. They're in the Minnesota legislature. They're trying to keep transgender kids out of appropriate sports leagues. The bathroom discussion goes on everywhere. So the transgender community is saying, really, you want transgender women to use male bathrooms? You want transgender men to use female bathrooms?
More on which later in international news.
Well, I want to show this picture that, and maybe we have it a little lower down, but I bring it up because this is the protest that's happening. This is in Canada, but it's happening around this country too, and that is transgender activists who are saying, now there is a transgender woman in a men's bathroom. Plett is a Canadian legislator, that's why his name is on this sign. Plett put me here. But she is showing how ridiculous it looks for her to use a men's bathroom.
Right. I've always said that. Where do you want this person to go to the bathroom? And of course, one of the right-wing leaders said they should wear diapers. That is what he said to me.
God. Saks Fifth Avenue has settled its suit with a former employee who is transgender, Laith Jarmal, who was harassed by coworkers and supervisors.
The attorney was Jillian Weiss, a former guest on this show.
Yes, a transgender lawyer and activist. The Saks had tried to get out of this by saying there's no law protecting transgender employees in Texas or nationally. And they were roundly criticized for that. And so now they have settled it. No publicizing of the terms of the settlement, but that case has been settled.
And we're still not allowed to march in the St. Patrick's Day parade. Irish LGBT groups aren't. So we're protesting on Tuesday, March 17th, which is St. Patrick's Day at 11 a.m. at 5th Avenue and 57th Street in Manhattan. This is for 24 years now.
We'll be there with big, huge, beautiful banners. West side of 5th Avenue between 56th and 57th, 11 a.m. to 1 p.m. Come anytime during that time.
The Grand Marshal of the parade is Cardinal Timothy Dolan, who just got a little setback because he was Bishop of Milwaukee, and he took $55 million of church funds into a cemetery fund to protect it, and he got a nice ruling from to protect it from lawsuits by the people who've been molested by priests, and they went bankrupt. So now a judge, the Court of Appeals has said, you can't protect the money that way. That's not a religious function.
Speaking of religious, and going back to the military, a Navy chaplain, Lieutenant Commander Wesley Motter, who is a Pentecostal, may be discharged from the Navy. He's been described by his superiors as intolerant and unable to function because he's such a bigot. In the military, you can be a chaplain and refuse service to people who you are offended by your religious beliefs if you replace yourself with someone else who can minister to them. But what you cannot do is sit there and lecture them on who they are and tell them their behavior is inappropriate and all that, which he has been doing both to gay people and to women. No sex outside of marriage, must be straight, can't be pregnant and unmarried.
He doesn't respect our religious freedom.
Evidently not, but he's in a lot of trouble, which is terrific.
Can we talk about some people who've passed?
Yes.
Yes. We lost Vinnie Allegrini this week. Now, he was a friend of ours, but he was also we have a picture of him. He was a pioneering gay and AIDS activist, most often with his husband, Mark DeSola Price, who's there on the right. That's Vinnie on the left.
Their dog in the middle.
He died at 66 after years of living with HIV and chronic hepatitis B. He was a professional hairstylist, once associated with Vidal Sassoon. In recent years, he kept us looking fit on this show.
I need a haircut.
He was in he and Mark were in the 10th anniversary of Paz Magazine's cover, naked, when that's the way they celebrated the 10th anniversary of the magazine. And the memorial service is Sunday, March 22nd at 3 o'clock at the Unitarian Church at 48 Monroe Street in Brooklyn Heights.
We'll be there.
We will.
We also mourn the death of Dirk Schaefer at 52, found dead in his car in Los Angeles. Cause of death still to be determined. He was Playboy's Playgirl
yes.
Man of the Year in 1952.
No. Can't be.
Sorry, 1982. 82.
Yes.
I'll
put my glasses on and tell you it's 92.
Thank you.
Okay.
I am an idiot.
That's a no-no.
But he made a movie called Man of the Year about the conflict between being the sex symbol for straight women and being gay.
Yep.
And he was beloved in LA and a very successful model and actor, and tragedy that he's dead at 52. Probably a heart attack, but they're still investigating that.
In much more advanced years was Albert Maysles, the great documentarian. You know him from Grey Gardens and movies like Salesman in '68 and Gimme Shelter about the Rolling Stones. But he also made documentaries about Vladimir Horowitz, who was gay, abortion, desperate choices. He had a great deal of integrity. And if Hetrick Martin Institute had allowed it, they would have made one about Ann Northrup's work teaching kids in the schools. But we couldn't get that to happen.
His surviving wife, Jillian Walker, is a therapist at the Ackerman Family Institute. and I knew a woman who worked there with her, and they invited me in to watch the work they were doing with same-sex couples and families. And then they came and watched us work in the schools, and then Jillian sent her husband, Al Maisels, to come watch us work in the schools, and he wanted to make a documentary, and Patrick Martin turned him down. But he was a tremendously sweet guy.
Yep.
And his wife's terrific too,
Brilliant.
and that's a huge loss, but he lived a long, full life.
Another murder of a transgender woman of color to report. Now, this happened January 9th. The woman's name was Poppy Edwards. This is the 7th such homicide this year out in Louisville, Kentucky.
Yeah, they finally
suspect.
nailed down the gender identity
Yes.
and
a suspect
the details.
is in custody and charged with murder, Henry Gleaves.
And we support the middle school kids in Beaverton, Oregon, who put up a big rainbow sign, born gay, follow the ray, born straight, refuse to hate. One parent complained and said, hey, you don't allow Christmas celebrations. Why are you allowing a sign like this? And the school took the sign right down.
Okay.
But the kids are upset. And in Berrien Springs, Michigan, Andrews University, a fine Christian school, has canceled a bake sale that was scheduled to raise money for homeless LGBT youth because they're Christians and this is against their religion.
Okay.
Yeah.
International news.
Yes.
Well, okay, we did Canada. In China, Li Yin-hee, 63, the Dr. Ruth of China, has opened up about the fact that her partner of 17 years is a transgender man. And the public reaction and the press reaction has been surprisingly supportive.
Yes, but also in China, the police arrested 5 women planning an International Women's Day demonstration. They broke into what is known as Queer House, where some of them were living, and it's believed that they did this because Parliament was having a 2-week session and they were trying to prevent the demonstration and clear out activists.
Peru's Congress took up the civil unions bill on Tuesday and turned it down, although it may come up again. A Catholic official called the bill's sponsor, Carlos Bruce, a maricón, and a TV and stage director, Ricardo Moran, came out as a result of this debate.
The European Court of Human Rights, which covers 47 countries and states, ruled for a trans man in Turkey who had been, because there are rules there and in 20 other countries in Europe that say you cannot have a gender change unless you can prove you have been sterilized. And the European Court of Human Rights said that is wrong and inhumane and you can't have such laws.
Good news and bad news from the United Kingdom. They delayed a decision on a lesbian asylum seeker from Nigeria because she has children and was therefore, quote, not part of the social group known as lesbians. According to the Home Office, you can't be a heterosexual one day and a lesbian the next day, just as you can't change your race. And the lawyers for her are calling this highly offensive, which it is.
At a minimum.
On the other side, the Equalities Minister in the United Kingdom wrote to authorities in 70 countries, including the United States, seeking clarity on the rights of married same-sex couples while traveling or living abroad.
We would like some clarification, too. In Sicily, the regional assembly, Sicily is not the most progressive region of Italy, but the regional assembly has approved a civil union registry and a non-discrimination law that includes sexual orientation and gender identity, and the local bishop approves of these moves.
Unlike in Ireland, where the gay marriage referendum is May 22nd, and it's not a slam dunk, Colm Tóibín said that because the government supports it. But this may help. The church is really against it. An Irish bishop said that God no more intends us to be homosexual than to have birth defects.
In Japan, the education ministry has told schools nationwide that they must take better care of their LGBTI intersex students, must work to stop bullying, stop suicides, do training on these issues, and help parents of students with a homosexual disorder.
Burkina Faso in Africa figured out that gay sex is not criminally banned there, so they're looking to do that. And to ban same-sex marriage at the same time, or criminalize it, actually.
Europride 2015 is scheduled for Riga, Latvia, but it may be threatened by a sneaky competing application from anti-globalists, as they call themselves in Latvia, who have applied to have events and demonstrations during the same time period, which would preclude Europride, still to be sorted out.
Slovenia, the upper house gave its approval to same-sex marriage, but they still could face a referendum there from the right wing.
In AIDS and health news, the one thing I have is that on the West Coast, they're turning up cases of blinding ocular syphilis. They found about a dozen to 15 cases in Seattle, San Francisco, and LA, mostly gay men. Please be tested for syphilis and watch out.
And we told you about this new hopeful treatment for HIV called immunoprophylaxis by gene transfer. Well, now it turns out they're now looking to use it for Ebola, malaria, and cystic fibrosis. So it may be a breakthrough because there were so many people with AIDS. They are looking for what amounts to essentially a vaccine. So it might work in other diseases.
Yes, if it works in humans at all. They've only tested it in monkeys.
And everybody heard about the Obamacare thing. And this is, by the way, the 13th annual LGBT Health Awareness Week. And they're pushing trusting relationships with your doctors.
All right, entertainment news. Well, I just heard that on Switched at Birth, I believe a new ABC show, Meredith Baxter is on it as the grandmother of one of the families, and has on the show, her character has come out as a lesbian, which she did not do in her recent guest starring role on The Young and the Restless.
The name of Avery Fisher Hall is being changed to David Geffen Hall. Why? He's a gay guy. He gave them $100 million.
Well, Avery Fisher had given them a lot of money, but they took his name off the hall by paying off his descendants a little. And David Geffen has put in the contract for his $100 million that his name will be there in perpetuity.
There it goes.
But his $100 million is only a fifth of the money they are raising to do the renovation they want to do.
So it's getting off cheap.
Exactly.
Did we show
Drives
this?
a good bargain.
Did we show this yet?
No.
No, we have a picture of a TV show called The Fosters from ABC Family. It featured a kiss between two 13-year-old male characters. It's seen as a first on network TV.
First for youngest.
Yes.
Certainly we've seen teenagers kissing on Glee for years.
The boys in the show grew close when one supported the other when he was bullied for wearing nail polish. The series is produced by Peter Page, who did Queer as Folk.
If you are a fan of opera and are interested in a surrealist gay opera based on a Federico Garcia Lorca work, El Público, with a flamenco basis, is available online until June 9th. It was performed at the Teatro Real de Madrid. And if you go to concert.arte.tv, you can see El Público.
At the Abington Theater in New York, I saw an ironically titled play called Happy End by Ido Netanyahu.
Not Beckett's Happy End?
No. It's about German Jews in Berlin as Hitler came to power in '32. It's got a good cast and a great set, and it doesn't break a lot of new ground, but it's very good to contemplate the power of denial, lest we allow history to repeat itself. There's a righteous Gentile in the play, and he's praised for what he's doing for his Jewish colleagues, and he says, the Jews, he says, it's Germany I care about. And then that's, if more of us said, what was happening to African Americans and gay people in this country is hurting America, as opposed to worrying about the particular minority group in particular, I think we would all be better off.
Well, speaking of happy news, why don't you tell us about Broadway Backwards? You have a couple of minutes to do that.
Well, this was the benefit for Broadway Cares, Equity Fights AIDS, and the LGBT Center. And actually, it's the first time I've been. It was at the packed Hirschfeld Theater. Men sing women's songs and women sing men's songs. And it's really the best show of the season, hosted by Julie Halston and Rob McClure, old pals. Florence Brady Bunch Henderson, we have a picture of her at 81, surreally did a raunchy turn on There's Nothing Like a Dame, grabbing women and all that kind of stuff. Lily Tomlin stumbled over saying LGBT. She had trouble getting it out. She said, that should be easy for me. I'm at least 2 of those. Aaron Lazar and Tony Yazbek, we have a picture of them, movingly sang A Boy Like That and I Have a Love from the love duet from West Side Story. It's just very moving to see these love songs done that way. Brian Stokes Mitchell sang The Man I Love. Maureen McGovern sang This Nearly Was Mine from South Pacific. But the standing ovations were for Titus Burgess, who closed the first half with I'm Telling You from Dreamgirls.
I'm not going.
Yes. And Shauna, a woman named Shauna Hamick, Hamic. She's a plus-size star she was in The Last Ship. She did the most powerful rendition of I Am What I Am from La Cage aux Folles that I've ever seen. She's only 5'6", but she looked about 10 foot tall. So congratulations to all the folks at Broadway Cares. In the center, they raised about $466,000.
Yeah, I mean, this started years ago, and it seemed like a sort of light gimmick.
$10, and you went to the center and you heard it.
Yeah. But it's grown into something really significant and moving.
Yes, and it is, and it's it's amazing. The Broadway community is so amazing the way they pour their hearts out on these things.
And you saw a very moving show recently, and interviewed today the star and the director. The show is The Absolute Brightness of Leonard Pelkey, and let's take our viewers to that interview with the star James Lacine and the director Tony Speciale.
And joining us now are James Lacine, the writer and performer of The Absolute Brightness of Leonard Pelkey, and the director of the show, Tony Speciale. And, for those of you who watch this show, I don't get that enthusiastic about a lot of theater in this thing, but I came back from this show just thinking this is the best thing I've seen all season for sure.
Oh, wow. Thanks so much.
Seriously.
Thanks, Andy.
You're doing wonderful work. So, The Absolute Brightness of Leonard Pelkey is a show about what? What do you want to tell people about this show that's playing down at Dixon Place until March 28th that would draw them in?
Well, it's a story of a small New Jersey town on the Jersey Shore. And it's really what happens when this 14-year-old boy, who's very original and is sort of interesting, actually suddenly just disappears. And so I play a lot of the people in the town who are dealing with what happened to him and trying to find him. And it's an investigation that's led by this detective who is sort of the narrator of the story.
Okay. Now, cover your ears if you don't like hearing your reviews. But
that's all right.
The Times called this a superlative solo show. They said you were a pretty darn dazzling beacon of theatrical talent, and they said that, Tony, the Times said you sharply directed it, and the Gay City News said you thoughtfully directed it, and that's what you usually do. You of course, are also the director of what was called Unnatural Acts. At one time, play about the Harvard secret court of the 1920s, and you are also the creator of the movie Trevor, which is about a comedy about a gay teen suicide. Would you say?
Comedy is an interesting word. Suicide and comedy in the same sentence.
Which led to the formation of the Trevor Project, and you are the co-founder of the Trevor Project, which is a 24-hour line out there that is, we talk about it all the time. Do we have the? Yeah, we can put the number up there or the website for the Trevor Project. That would be great. So this started out as a novel that you wrote a couple of years ago.
In 2008, I wrote a young adult novel called Absolute Brightness. And the story was told from the point of view of a 16-year-old girl named Phoebe, who's actually in the show. But I just felt like after 2009, 2010, the whole It Gets Better campaign and bullying and Tyler Clementi and everything that happened, it seemed to me there was still more to say about this issue of kids being different and being targeted for being different, and how hard it is to be different at that age, 13, 14. So I wanted to tell the story to an adult audience that was maybe a little more complex, a little darker.
So what drew you to want to play all the characters, and to turn it into a solo show? And Tony, what drew you into this project?
I've done a couple of solo shows before in my life. 2 of them. And, you know, it's a form that I really, really love, but it's hard. It's a hard thing to do, and so you know, it's not like I turn them out one after another. But for me, what's most important is finding a reason why one person needs to tell this story, beyond just me getting up there to show off. And I felt that there was something about this narrator. It's really his story. You know, it's how he's changed by not only what happened to him, but in the course of telling the story, and how storytelling itself can create a change in somebody.
And when you say the storyteller, you mean the detective. I think we
Yeah.
have a picture of you in that a role of the detective. If you can distinguish that from you as the hairdresser. Well, we'll see if we can get that up on the screen. But yeah, and this is a Shakespeare quoting detective, yes?
Yeah, he's sort of, you know, he's certainly tougher than I am, and you know, and certainly more Jersey than I am. But he's sort of, you know, during the course of the story, he awakens in some way to his own prejudice, and he kind of wakes up to this world that he lives in, this town.
Mm-hmm. And Tony.
Well, I think we started talking about working on this a couple years ago, and when you first approached me, you were considering, you know, should it be adapted as a solo piece, or should it be a play with multiple characters? And then I remember you reading a section of it to me, and where you played a couple of the characters, and it was crystal clear to me in that moment that, oh yeah, this should be this is a solo show, and you felt the same way. And James has this very rare talent, I think, where he's able to shift characters, and he plays them in a deep, profound level, and it's not superficial. And I think the challenge with solo shows is you're up there, you're the action and the reaction, and so it takes a lot of energy and a lot of focus. And I was interested in that challenge as a director, to sort of be that mirror for him and to help provide the space for him to do that. And it's great writing, it's funny, it's moving. I really loved the novel, so it was that.
You're stealing all my lines.
Oh, sorry,
No.
sorry.
We were talking the other day, and right before the show the other night, and Tony said, you know, it's really not like doing a play, it's like doing a sporting event, you know, because, and Tony's like the coach, you know, because you know, every night you do a solo show like that, you go out, you don't know who the audience is going to be, you don't know what their makeup is going to be. I mean, you generally know how the show is going to go, but they're the other actor,
right? Mm-hmm.
Right? So it's really like you just go out there like, okay, here we go. And, you know, Tony's been really great at sort of keeping me in high performance mode for the sporting event, right. A, and B, also creating a vehicle that is foolproof, right. So that it doesn't matter how the audience is.
Right. I mean, I noticed this is a relatively small theater. How many seats have you got down there at Dixon Place, at dixonplace.org, if you want to learn more about the show?
99 seats, I think.
Oh, is that all it is?
Yeah.
It seemed larger.
They have a few seats in the balcony that they can occasionally
right.
squeeze people in.
Well, and of course, this was the night of a big snowstorm in New York. Not that that's not all we've had all winter.
It seems like it's always the night of a big snowstorm.
It was packed because people have heard about the show and they really want to see it. But I noticed in the beginning, as with many theater audiences, when they sit down and the characters are a little funny, they want to laugh. You know, so they want to laugh at everything, and you play some characters, some real characters in the sense of the people on the Jersey Shore and that kind of stuff. But then it starts to quiet down as people realize there is a very serious story here. Mm. So yes, it does have funny moments, but it's also very, as David Kennerly said, gripping. And the other thing David Kennerly said in the Gay City News was that he thought it was a true story while he was sitting there listening to it.
Yeah, so many people have come up to me afterwards, and what's interesting is they don't say, is it a true story? They say, this is a true story, right? And I'm it's not a true story, but it's to me, it's like the highest compliment you could get.
Yes.
And when you create art and
Truth.
people actually think that it's, that this really happened. But I think it has so many, fingerprints all over it of things that actually are happening and
Yes.
have happened in this country to, young kids and kids who are different, and, I certainly am, interested in all of those things. So I think that the reality of those incidents have seeped through into the
Yes.
art.
Where did you find these people? And your characters. I mean,
inside.
Yeah.
Inside. And as Ruth Gordon famously says in Harold and Maude, that movie, they're my species. I'm interested in them. They're my species.
So there are all these people, and to some extent, as I said, people could start hearing them as sort of stereotypes of the detective and the hairdresser and the tough, but you kind of explode that during the show. How did you do that?
I don't know. To be perfectly honest, it's the mystery of writing and performing. I think it's a sort of amalgam of both of those things. But I think that everybody has that experience where you sit with somebody long enough and you start to actually think they're interesting, even like the weirdest person or the most boring person. You just stay with them long enough and they have something to say, Shine the light on them and they give it up.
As you were working on it, what new things were you discovering as you were, as this was unfolding and the story was unfolding?
That there are lines that are clearly engineered to get a laugh. They're just written that way. And then there are lines that are written to be a joke, but also have a deeper meaning behind it. And so as we worked on the play, I got more and more excited about those moments where an audience laughs, but then they're touched at the same time. And I always think about, I can't remember who said this, but the famous saying of, the funniest things are the things that are the most truthful, and you laugh at things that are just brutally truthful. And I think there's a lot of that in this play. And so I think as we worked on the piece, James went deeper and deeper. And so it doesn't, the comedy doesn't suffer but from these more serious emotional moments, but I think they've grown, and I'm personally interested in those moments.
So I think Leonard is quoted as saying, if I can't be myself, the terrorists win. Is that
If I
right?
stop being myself, the
Is that it?
terrorists will win.
Oh, okay, I was writing in the dark.
Yeah.
But talk about the other characters and how they react to them. Talk about the kind of people that are in the show that you embody.
Well, I think for me, they're the people who are in the shadows of a small town. They're just the people who nobody really notices, and those are the people that Leonard, this 14-year-old boy, gravitated to. In order to feel safe, right? He gravitated towards some people who maybe aren't in the spotlight, and so what the play does is it takes those people and it puts them in the spotlight, and you realize that he had this incredible connection with them. He saw them for who they were. One of the women that he befriends, she says, he saw us not as we were, but as we hoped to be. Right. And that's it. That was his gift. He was able to actually give that to these people, and they became more themselves. Right. And I actually think that that's one of the things that happens when you are fully yourself. You give other people the permission to be fully themselves, or you upset them, right? It either goes in one of the other directions. But I'm kind of exploring this idea that Leonard's ability to be himself actually allowed other people to be themselves. And the town kind of found its heart or its conscience.
So, despite some of the aspects of the story which we won't discuss, because don't want to give everything away, you're hopeful about the way things are going, despite all the bad news that we get, and and people being bashed and murdered and all that other kind of stuff. We report a lot about transgender murders. We're going to have another one today.
I think, look, I'm a ridiculously optimistic person, and it's terrible what's happening, but on the other hand, we know about it. These things have always been happening. In 2009, 2010, during that period of those highly publicized suicides of gay teens and young boys who were committing suicide because they were being targeted as gay, right? That happens all the time. We just don't hear about it. Mm-hmm. We heard for 1 month. In 2009, we heard about them all. Mm-hmm. But this happens all the time. I just feel like we're getting that information now, and people are being more visible. So they're becoming targeted in some way. People are less willing to live below the radar.
Right. And you're still very involved with the Trevor Project. And do they find, I mean, do you find there that things are, from the calls that you're getting from young people around the country, that things are getting better?
I wish I could say that. I wish I could say that things were getting better. I think that it's certainly better than when I was a kid. That I can say. I think that we have a long way to go, and I think we have to work harder to make it better for this younger generation. It's just not enough to say it gets better.
Okay.
For me, it really takes. We have to figure out how to make it better for them and give them more resources. And also, what do you do when you encourage somebody to be themselves, right? Like we're encouraging all these young people to be themselves, but you know, we have to actually make it safe for them to be themselves and make sure that they are in a position where it's okay, you know.
Yes. That was one of my problems with the It Gets Better thing. It's sort of like, wait till you go to college, you know, or get out of the high school. But we have to make high school safe.
It was an amazing thing. I mean, Dan Savage, he did an incredible thing by starting It Gets Better, and it was a great moment in the history of sort of the movement. But for our, you know, for the Trevor Project and the people that we serve, it was hard to hear because the divide between the life I'm living in high school or middle school and the life that I see out there, it's gigantic. They don't know how to cross that divide, nor do they think they'll actually live that long.
And a lot of this is dealt with in the show. A lot of these issues are dealt with in the show, I think. I mean, you know, for people to get a grip on. So people may wonder out there in TV land, why are we talking about a show at a little theater in Soho that is going to close on March 28th? Still have a chance to see it at Dixon Place. What are your plans with this show?
Well, we've been very fortunate to have some great press, and there are a lot of producers who have been visiting us, and there's interest in moving the show after Dixon Place. And so we're just kind of, you call it speed dating, I know, which is the way I think about it. In terms of, we're just meeting people and seeing who's the right partner and where the play could have a longer life, because you know, 99 seats for 16 shows is not a lot of opportunities for people to see the show. And so we want to make sure we go somewhere where we can have a healthy run and the show can have a long life. So we're optimistic, but nothing is definite yet. So,
but as I said to Tony, it's important to remember that we actually did what we set out to do, and not forget that fact that we actually started to do this play. It was like, you know, we started in January, and it just, you know, it's amazing the reception that it's gotten in such a short period of time, and that's such
just terrific. And I hope PBS is listening and they'll put it on their off. No, seriously.
We're available.
So as soon as I saw it, I said this would be perfect for that series and a lot better than some of the things that they did.
And also good for people to see out in the country, out in, you know, across the country where everybody's thinking about this issue, you know, about kids and how to encourage them to be themselves.
Congratulations and thank you for a wonderful. And also, you just wanted to let us know about a reading of what's called The Secret Court now?
Yes. James and I actually met a few years ago. He saw the production of A Natural Acts I directed at Classic Stage Company, and we're now, we've revised it, and we are introducing a new version of that play called The Secret Court in a one-night-only staged reading at Classic Stage Company on March 30th.
Okay, we will put
to benefit the Trevor Project.
We will put that in our email. If you want information on that, write to me at Andy Hum at AOL about all this information, and thank you for being with us.
Thank you so much for having us,
Andy.
Andy.
Bye.